Since he was little, Lucas carried within him a dream that seemed unattainable. In a small town forgotten by time, he saw football as his only way out, his only chance to change the destiny that seemed already set for him. While other kids his age were enjoying their youth without any worries, Lucas spent hours and hours kicking a worn-out ball against the wall at home, repeating movements he saw on television, trying to imitate the greatest players in the world. He didn't have proper football boots, he didn't train on well-kept pitches, and he had never participated in a professional tournament, but an inextinguishable flame burned inside him, the certainty that football was his only option. The talent was undeniable. Those who saw him playing on clay courts commented on his speed, his precision in his shots, and the almost instinctive way in which he dribbled past stronger opponents. However, talent is not always enough when you are born without the necessary resources to transform a gift into a career. Lucas grew up hearing stories of boys who had been discovered by scouts, who had the chance to show their potential at big clubs, but that reality seemed distant. He had no managers, he didn't know anyone influential in the sports world, and his family could barely pay the monthly bills, let alone pay for trips to try out for elite teams. Every night, before going to sleep, Lucas stared at the ceiling of the small room he shared with his younger brother and wondered how much longer he could keep that dream alive. There was a constant struggle between hope and reality, between the desire to keep trying and the fear that in the end everything would be nothing more than an illusion. But even on the hardest days, when the defeats seemed greater than the victories, he held on to the one thing no one could take away from him, his passion for the game. Destiny, however, always has mysterious ways of acting, and for Lucas, a simple day that started like any other would end up becoming the turning point of his story. An unlikely meeting with the greatest legend in world football was about to change everything, even though at that moment he still had no idea what was coming. Have you ever had the feeling that your life could change in a single instant? As if, out of nowhere, an opportunity appeared and turned everything you ever dreamed of into reality. Lucas had no idea, but destiny was about to put him in front of Cristiano Ronaldo. An unlikely encounter, a unique chance. Do you believe that chance can change a life forever? Comment here what you would do if you were in his place. Luke's days began before the sun even rose. The alarm clock would go off at 5 in the morning, but often he would already be awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the future. He would get up without complaining, put on his worn-out sneakers and leave in silence so as not to wake his younger brother. The mother was already in the kitchen, preparing thin coffee, the only thing they could afford before another day of hard work. Lucas took the stale bread, took a quick sip and left in a hurry, as the boss did not accept delays. I worked at a small grocery store in the neighborhood, unloading trucks, stacking boxes, and sweeping dusty floors. It was a hard job, and the salary was barely enough to help his mother pay the bills. Between one task and another, his mind fled to the football field. He imagined himself wearing the shirt of a big club, hearing the stadium shout his name. But reality pulled him back every time the boss shouted at him to be faster. At noon, when his shift ended, his hands were dirty and his muscles ached, but he could not rest. He ran to school, arrived sweaty and hungry, tried to pay attention in class, but exhaustion overcame him. Teachers warned him about his sleepiness. Classmates laughed at his tired appearance, but he never complained. I knew I needed to study, because if football didn't work out, I would have to find another path. When classes ended, the battle continued. He ran to the improvised camp in the neighborhood, where he trained alone or with the few friends who still believed in his talent. He used an old ball and torn sneakers, but he played with the same intensity as a professional athlete. Every shot, every dribble, every run was made as if a scout was there watching. He couldn't afford to make mistakes, but no matter how hard he dedicated himself, he didn't see progress. Trials at the big clubs required money for travel, registration fees, and even better football boots. Lucas had none of that. Time passed, and hope oscillated between faith and despair. The fear of being stuck in that routine forever consumed him. He needed a miracle. What he didn't know was that this miracle was closer than he imagined. When the sun began to set, Lucas still hadn't finished his day. After hours of hard work and exhausting classes, he headed to the dirt field where he trained alone. It was a place forgotten by everyone, surrounded by a rusty fence and improvised wooden beams. The uneven ground made every pass a challenge, every shot a test of precision, but Lucas didn't care. For him, that field was the biggest stadium in the world, and every solitary training session was a championship final. The silence around was broken only by the sound of the ball hitting the wall, the quick steps on the dry earth, and the heavy breathing of those who refused to give up. He trained as if his life depended on it, and, in a way, it did. There was no coach to correct his mistakes. There was no crowd to encourage him, but there was a certainty within him. One day, someone would notice him. Every rep, every kick, every run was powered by that unwavering faith. Lucas knew that talent alone was not enough. It took persistence, it took sacrifice, and he was willing to do anything to prove he belonged in football. On the days when he felt weakest, when the pain in his body almost prevented him from continuing, he would close his eyes and imagine the scene he had dreamed of so many times. He saw himself wearing the shirt of a big club, running across the impeccable pitch, hearing the crowd shout his name. That image kept him going. Sometimes children from the neighborhood would come over to watch. They watched in amazement as he repeated the same movements dozens of times, as if each one was decisive. For them, Lucas was already a professional player, even without a contract, even without sponsorship. But he knew the real world didn't work like that. To become a real athlete, you needed more than talent and desire. You had to be seen, and that was the hardest part. No matter how many hours he trained, if no one looked at him, it would be as if he didn't exist. Time passed, and the doubt came back to haunt him. Would it all be worth it? He didn't know the answer, but deep down something told him he was on the right path, and that feeling was enough to keep him going. What he didn't imagine was that, soon, this improvised field would be the scene of an encounter that would change everything. The wind raised the dust on the field as Lucas kicked the ball against the wall once again. His muscles were tired. His feet hurt in his torn sneakers, but he ignored his tiredness. He was so focused that he didn't even notice the different movement around him. It wasn't common to see luxury cars passing by, much less a recording crew setting up cameras and testing lights. It was as if suddenly that forgotten space had become the center of attention. But Lucas didn't notice. For him, that training was like all the others. Across the field, a figure watched silently. Cristiano Ronaldo was there for a quick recording of a commercial. The script said he should just show up, greet some kids and kick a ball for the cameras. But before filming even started, something caught his attention. He saw a young man training alone, completely oblivious to what was happening around him. Unlike the other boys who ran to take photos or just watch the recording, that boy was focused, repeating movements with an intensity that Ronaldo recognized well. He had seen it before. In fact, he had once been that boy. Intrigued, Ronaldo crossed his arms and watched. Lucas still didn't notice. His dribbling was quick, precise, and his shot was strong, even without wearing proper cleats. He was a raw talent, but what impressed most was not his technique. It was the way he trained. There was a seriousness, an obsession in his eyes. It was the same expression Ronaldo saw in the mirror when he was just a boy trying to prove to the world that he had something special. The film crew called Ronaldo to the recording, but he raised his hand, asking for a moment. He wanted to see more. I wanted to make sure this wasn't a coincidence. The businessman next to him asked what was so special about that boy, and Ronaldo just replied, "He reminds me of someone I know very well." And then, for the first time, Lucas looked to the side and saw who was there. His heart raced. He blinked, thinking it was an illusion. Cristiano Ronaldo was looking directly at him, the living legend, the greatest player in the world. What would happen next would change his life forever. Lucas felt his heart beat faster. His legs were momentarily stuck to the dirt floor. It was as if time had stopped. He blinked a few times, trying to process the scene before him. Cristiano Ronaldo, the biggest name in world football, was standing there, looking at him with an expression of curiosity and interest. That didn't make sense. Why was he, among so many people, being watched by one of the greatest players in history. Ronaldo remained there motionless, with his eyes fixed on the boy's every movement. He didn't just see a boy kicking a ball on a makeshift field, he saw a story he knew well. I recognized the sparkle in their eyes, the hunger for a better future, the discipline of someone who doesn't train just because they like the game, but because they have no other option. Ronaldo knew that feeling better than anyone. When he was a boy on his small island of Madeira, he also trained alone, faced difficulties, heard that he might never get anywhere. But he never accepted that. He had always known that his destiny lay in his own hands, and now before him stood a boy who seemed to have that same determination. Lucas, little by little, felt control of his own body return. He tried to hide his nervousness. He tried to continue training as if nothing was happening, but it was impossible. Ronaldo's gaze seemed to weigh on him as if testing his resistance, his concentration, his ability to ignore pressure. It was a silent test, and Lucas knew he couldn't make a mistake. Every touch of the ball now seemed more important. Every movement needed to be perfect. Ronaldo took a step forward. The film crew members exchanged glances, not quite understanding what was happening. The Portuguese star had completely disconnected from the recording. His manager tried to get his attention, but Ronaldo waved his hand without looking away from the boy. He wanted to see more. He wanted to make sure that impression wasn't a mistake. And then, without Lucas being able to predict it, Ronaldo gave a slight smile and made a subtle gesture with his head as if saying, "Continue." Lucas took a deep breath. He knew that this was the most important moment of his life. If there was a chance to be noticed, it was now. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine when he saw Cristiano Ronaldo approaching. The world around him seemed to disappear. The noise of cars on the street, the voices of the recording team, even the wind that raised dust from the field. Everything was in the background. His eyes were fixed on the football legend, who was now walking towards him with firm but calm steps. Lucas didn't know what to do. Should I say something? Continue training? To stop? His heart was beating so hard that it seemed to echo throughout the entire field. Ronaldo stopped in front of him, crossed his arms and smiled slightly, as if he already knew what the boy was feeling. He had been in that position before. He knew the weight his presence caused, and perhaps for that reason, he didn't want to prolong the suspense. The star then extended his hand and introduced himself, as if necessary. Lucas, not knowing what to do, shook his hand with a mix of respect and disbelief. He couldn't say a single word. "Play well, boy," said Ronaldo, analyzing the improvised field. "How long have you been training here?" Lucas stuttered as he responded. He tried to appear confident, but the truth was, he was paralyzed. He had never imagined that one day he would have the chance to talk to his greatest idol, and now here he was, being observed, being recognized. Ronaldo noticed his nervousness, but he also noticed something more important, the flame in the boy's eyes. That same flame that one day made him leave Madeira Island with nothing but a dream and the determination to become the best. Then suddenly, without warning, Ronaldo picked up the nearby ball and threw it towards Lucas. The boy, out of pure instinct, controlled the ball perfectly without letting it touch the ground. Ronaldo smiled, impressed. "I want to see what you're capable of." Lucas swallowed hard. It was a challenge, a test. There, at that moment, he was no longer just an anonymous young man playing alone. He was about to show his talent to Cristiano Ronaldo. And maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change forever. Lucas felt the weight of the moment like never before. It was unlike any game I had ever played with friends, unlike any training session I had ever done alone. Now, every movement was watched by the watchful eyes of Cristiano Ronaldo. There was no time to make mistakes, no room for hesitation. He needed to prove at that very moment that he deserved to be there, that he wasn't just another kid with an impossible dream, but someone with real talent, someone ready to seize the opportunity of a lifetime. Ronaldo took a few steps back, crossed his arms and kept his gaze fixed on him. The other members of the film crew began to move away a little, realizing that something special was happening. The star's manager, who until then had insisted that he continue with the recording, was now silent, watching with the same curiosity. Everyone was waiting to see what Lucas was capable of. With the ball at his feet, he took a deep breath and tried to ignore his nervousness. His toes still hurt from hours of work that day, but it didn't matter. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with the field dust. But that didn't matter either. What mattered was the ball. He touched it lightly with the tip of his boot, feeling the contact reconnecting with something that had always been part of him. So, without thinking twice, he started playing. The first thing Ronaldo noticed was his naturalness. Lucas wasn't the type of player who forced movements or tried to impress with rehearsed plays. He played as if the ball were an extension of his own body. The dribbling was agile, the passes were precise, the driving was clean and confident. He varied his touches, controlling the ball with the inside of his feet, alternating between speed and calm. The dust rose as he moved, but nothing seemed to move him off track. Ronaldo smiled. There was something there, something rare, something he recognized. But I wanted to test more. Then suddenly he took off his watch, put it in his pocket and walked onto the field. Lucas froze for a second. "Now I want to see if you play well under pressure," said Ronaldo, patting the boy on the shoulder. Lucas could hardly believe that he was about to play against Cristiano Ronaldo. His fate was at stake. Lucas felt the blood pulsing in his temples. The air seemed thicker, each second longer. Cristiano Ronaldo, the greatest player in the world, was there, ready to test him. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't a simulation. It was real. He needed to play like he had never played before. He took a deep breath, trying to contain the adrenaline. His feet were firm on the dirt, and the ball rolled between them as if he knew that moment was special. Ronaldo stood with a slight smile on his face, a defiant gleam in his eyes. He wanted to see how far that boy could go. Lucas made the first touches, slightly turning his body, trying to analyze the space. He knew he couldn't panic. He needed to use his speed, his technique, his intelligence. Then, without hesitation, he took the first dribble. The movement was quick, unexpected. Lucas threw the ball slightly to the right, pretending that he was going to go that way, but at the last moment, he pulled it to the left and fired. Ronaldo moved, trying to cut the path, but the boy had already passed. The camera crew held their breath. Ronaldo's manager raised his eyebrows, and the star himself, for a brief second, was surprised. Lucas didn't stop. He continued to drive the ball, each touch demonstrating control and confidence. He was no longer playing just to impress Ronaldo. He was playing because that was his moment. That was the game of his life. With a quick turn, he sent the ball under Ronaldo's legs. A faint murmur of astonishment escaped among the spectators. Ronaldo laughed, shaking his head. "Not bad," he said, regaining his position, but Lucas knew that Ronaldo wouldn't let it go easily. In an instant, the star accelerated, took the ball and, with an impressive movement, threw it into the air, masterfully controlling it. The game had gotten serious. Now it wasn't just a test, it was a duel. Lucas felt the challenge rising within him. If Ronaldo wanted to test his limits, he was ready. With each play, with each exchange of passes, Ronaldo's admiration increased. There was something rare there, something he saw in few players. That boy had something special. And Ronaldo knew he couldn't ignore that. Cristiano Ronaldo stopped in the middle of the improvised field, took a deep breath and looked at Lucas with a mix of surprise and admiration. The boy, panting, still held the ball at his feet, not knowing for sure if it was all real. The silence around was almost absolute, as if everyone was waiting for the star's reaction. Ronaldo ran his hand over his chin thoughtfully, and then smiled slightly. Something inside him had already decided. He approached slowly, placed his hand on Lucas's shoulder, and said something that made the boy's heart race. "You have talent." "Lots of talent." Lucas tried to respond, but his voice broke. It was as if every fiber in his body was processing those words. Not just anyone was saying that. It was Cristiano Ronaldo. The greatest player in the world had just recognized his talent. But before Lucas could dive into that moment, Ronaldo continued. "Talent is just the beginning. What makes the difference is what you do with it." Lucas knew this better than anyone. Since he was little, he played not only because he loved football, but because he knew it was his only chance to change his life. He dedicated himself more than any other boy I knew. He trained alone, faced obstacles, worked hard to support his family. Now in front of Ronaldo, he felt that all that effort finally made sense. The star looked at his manager, who was still a little incredulous about the situation. Then he turned to Lucas and said something that would change his life forever. "I want you to have a real chance. I'm going to talk to some people." Lucas's eyes widened. Was that really what he had heard? The air seemed to disappear for an instant. What did that mean? Ronaldo noticed the boy's expression and smiled. "You're going to try out at a big club, and I want to see how far you can get." Lucas felt his legs almost give out. His dream, the one he fought for every day, was there, within his reach. Cristiano. Ronaldo, without hesitation, would use his influence to open doors that seemed unattainable. That unlikely meeting had just turned into the most important moment of his life. Lucas could hardly believe what was happening. Cristiano Ronaldo's words still echoed in his mind. He would have a real chance, a test at a professional club. It was the opportunity he had always dreamed of, but which, until that moment, seemed as distant as the stars. Now, thanks to Ronaldo's gesture, that star was within his reach. The next few days passed in a blur. Ronaldo kept his promise. Some calls were made, some doors that seemed locked before opened. Lucas received the news that he had to attend one of the biggest training centers in the country for a testing period. His heart almost came out of his mouth. It was real. It was his chance. On the appointed day, he arrived early. Earlier than any other boy who would also take the test. I was nervous, of course, but there was no room for fear. He had trained alone for years. Now, finally, he could prove that he belonged there. The green grass seemed like another world compared to the dirt field where he had grown up playing. The goalposts were impeccable. The ball slid across the field perfectly. It was a new universe, and he needed to adapt quickly. The first few minutes of training were intense. Lucas felt the difference right away. The level was high. The other players were strong, fast, experienced. But he couldn't be intimidated. He took a deep breath and concentrated. When the ball reached his feet, the world disappeared. He knew what to do. He dribbled one, escaped another marker, and without hesitation, shot. The ball hit the net. The technician, who was watching from a distance, raised his eyebrows. Scouts started paying attention to him. Every movement was analyzed. Every touch of the ball was a chance to show that he wasn't there by chance. The test continued, and Lucas gave himself completely. Every dribble, every pass, every shot carried his entire story, his entire fight. He couldn't fail. At the end of training, exhausted and with his uniform soaked in sweat, he turned to the side. And there he was. Cristiano Ronaldo, arms crossed, watching everything. Lucas didn't know what that meant, but one thing was certain. His future was about to be decided. Lucas still felt his heart racing when training ended. His legs felt heavy, his muscles throbbed, but he refused to show any signs of weakness. He had given his all. Now all that was left was to wait. The coach was talking to the scouts on the side of the field, exchanging looks that Lucas couldn't decipher. But among all the people present, there was one look that really mattered. Cristiano. Ronaldo was still there, arms crossed, observing every detail. The silence that dominated that moment seemed endless. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to contain his anxiety. He knew that at that moment every second counted, until finally the technician approached, keeping a serious expression. Lucas swallowed hard. It was now. "You've got talent, kid," said the coach, evaluating him from top to bottom. "But talent alone is not enough. We need players who know how to deal with pressure, who have discipline and a hunger to win." Lucas felt a chill down his spine. Was it the end? After everything, would he still need to prove more? But before his mind delved into insecurities, the coach continued, "And I saw all of this in you today. Welcome to the team." For a moment, Lucas couldn't process the words. He blinked, trying to absorb what he had just heard. Welcome to the team. He had succeeded, his chest filled with relief, excitement and pride all at the same time. Everything he fought for years, all the times he trained alone without knowing if it would be worth it, it all led to this moment. Ronaldo smiled. He already knew this was the outcome from the first touch of the ball. He walked up to Lucas, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, and said in a low but firm tone, "I knew you could do it. But this is just the beginning. Now it's your turn to make history." Lucas felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to speak, he wanted to thank him, but the words wouldn't come out. He just nodded, knowing that Ronaldo was right. His destiny had changed there, on that unlikely day, in that encounter that would never leave his memory, but that was just the first page of a new chapter. Now he was no longer just a boy with a dream, he was a player. The years passed, and Lucas was no longer that unknown boy who trained alone on a dirt field. His name was now in the newspapers, in sports headlines, in conversations among fans. He wore the shirt of a big club, played in the biggest stadiums in the world, and heard the screams of the fans echoing across the pitch. But despite everything he achieved, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the day that changed his life forever. Sitting in the locker room after another match, Lucas put a towel over his face, taking a deep breath. The game had been difficult, but he was used to the pressure. From the day he first stepped into a professional training center, he knew his journey would not be easy. He needed to prove in every training session that he deserved to be there. He needed to fight for every minute on the field, but he always carried within him the same flame that one day caught the attention of Cristiano Ronaldo. He took out his cell phone and opened an old photo, already a little worn by time. It was from the day Ronaldo saw him for the first time on that improvised field. He smiled alone. It all started there. It was an unlikely encounter, a moment that could have gone unnoticed, but Ronaldo saw something in him that no one else saw. And that's why Lucas was where he was today. Minutes later, while walking through the stadium corridors, he heard a commotion coming from the press room. His name had been mentioned in an interview. He stopped when he heard the familiar voice. He deserved every achievement. From the first moment, I knew I had something special. But what I'm most proud of is not the player he became, but the person he always was. Lucas smiled. Cristiano Ronaldo still followed his career, still believed in him. And in that moment he knew that one day he would do the same for another unknown boy, waiting for his chance in the world of football. Because, in the end, what really matters is not just getting to the top, but remembering who held your hand along the way. Have you ever stopped to think about who was the person who believed in you when no one else did? That moment when someone saw your potential and gave you a chance that changed everything. Lucas had Cristiano Ronaldo. And you, who was the person who inspired you and helped you move forward? Tell us here in the comments. If you've made it this far, we want to know how this video touched your heart. Comment below and share how this message spoke to you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue receiving transformative content. Leave a like to support this mission and, of course, watch the next video that is already on the final screen. See you there.